What happens when you push your husband to accept an open relationship, only for him to return the favor in a way you never expected? When I asked for an open relationship to sleep with my ex, I had no idea my husband would turn the tables, spending the night with his ex and serving me legal papers the next morning. Now I'm left questioning my choices and the life I thought I had. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Isla, and I've always considered myself to be in control of my life. It's a trait I've prided myself on for as long as I can remember. I like to think I'm a realist, never too emotional or reactive. I plan everything, and I know how to get what I want. So, when I started feeling a disconnect between me and my husband, Cole, I didn't get upset or overreact. I simply decided to take control of the situation. I wasn't going to let our marriage fall into the same routine of dullness and predictability that so many of my friends had fallen victim to. No, I was going to do something bold, something that would not only spice things up but also allow me to feel like I was still desirable, still in control. I had been thinking about it for a while now. The last few years with Cole had felt ordinary, too safe, too predictable. When we first met, he couldn't get enough of me. He used to call me beautiful every day, tell me I was the best thing that ever happened to him, and even send me flowers when he was on business trips. That felt amazing. I was the center of his world, and it was intoxicating. But somewhere along the way, that intensity faded. It's not like he became a different person overnight, but the affection started to feel mechanical. It wasn't that he didn't love me. I was sure of that, but it wasn't the same. His gestures had become routine, just like everything else in our life. I could predict every moment, every kiss, every hug. I didn't feel special anymore. I felt safe, like we were two people just going through the motions of married life. That's when Darren entered the picture. I knew him from years ago. He was an ex, someone I'd dated before Cole came into my life. It had ended on good terms, but we had lost touch. He came back into my life when I saw him on social media one day. We started talking, catching up, and, to be honest, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. There was a spark. It was exciting to feel wanted again, to remember what it felt like to be the object of someone's desire. Darren made me feel alive, like I was the same woman I'd been before Cole and I settled into our comfortable life. At first, I told myself it was just a bit of fun, a harmless flirtation. I didn't mean to go down this path, but the temptation was there. I felt myself becoming more drawn to Darren, and that's when the idea hit me. I could bring up the idea of an open relationship with Cole. We could have the freedom to explore our desires without hurting each other, right? I justified it by telling myself that Cole wouldn't even notice. He didn't seem to care much anymore, not the way he used to. Besides, we had been together for years. It was time for us both to be honest about what we needed, wasn't it? I've always been the kind of person who doesn't shy away from asking for what I want. So, I decided to approach Cole with the idea. I'd always believed that being open and honest was the key to a healthy relationship. I didn't expect him to be thrilled about it, but I figured he'd understand. After all, we both needed to feel wanted, right? I thought it was an opportunity to rejuvenate our relationship, bring some excitement back. If anything, it would give me the space to explore what had been missing, without guilt or shame. The conversation happened one evening, after dinner. I'd been rehearsing it in my head for days, so when the moment finally came, I was ready. I didn't expect him to get upset or to react negatively. I assumed he'd be pragmatic, like he always was, and agree. I told him we needed to talk about something important, and his face immediately tightened, like he knew something was coming, but he wasn't sure what. He always did that, had this calm, collected demeanor that made me think I could convince him of anything. I started slow, easing into it. "I've been thinking about something, Cole. About us," I said, keeping my voice casual, as if this were just another conversation. We've been together for so long, and I feel like things have gotten a bit predictable, don't you think? He nodded, but didn't say anything. So, I was thinking, I continued, maybe it would be good for us to explore other people, to have an open relationship. The silence that followed was heavier than I expected. His brow furrowed, and I could tell he was processing what I'd just said. I expected him to get defensive, to argue, but instead, he just stared at me, completely still. "Wait, what?" he asked quietly, as if he hadn't quite heard me right. I repeated myself, trying to be as calm and clear as possible. "I think it would help us grow. We can still be together, but we can explore other relationships, on the side." He looked at me for a long time, his face unreadable. I almost regretted saying anything, but I couldn't take it back now. This was what I wanted, what I needed. "I don't know about that, Isla," he finally said, his voice soft but firm. "It just seems wrong. I'm not sure I can just share you." I couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. Why was he making this harder than it needed to be? "It's not about sharing me," I said, trying to explain myself. "It's about freedom, about us both being able to be honest with ourselves and each other. If we're both open about what we want, then there's no reason for either of us to feel trapped. We can be happy and we can still have each other. Nothing has to change, except that we get to be free." He shook his head. "I don't know, Isla. I never thought this is what you wanted." "Well, this is what I want," I said, trying to sound confident. "And I think it could be good for us, for our relationship." There was another long pause. I could feel him retreating into himself, but I wasn't giving up. Not yet. I needed him to understand. "I'll think about it," he said finally, his voice colder now. "But I don't know if I'm okay with this." I felt a rush of relief. That wasn't a no. It was a maybe. Maybe he needed some time to come around, but that was fine. I could wait. This was my chance to get what I needed, and I wasn't going to let Cole's initial hesitation stand in my way. Cole didn't say much more that night. I spent the rest of the evening texting Evan, setting up a time to meet. I couldn't shake the feeling that things were slipping into dangerous territory, but I told myself it was fine. This was just part of being in a relationship. We both deserved to be happy. And if this was the way to make it happen, then so be it. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling a mix of excitement and nervous energy. The next day would be the start of something new. The next day, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation building inside me. After our conversation, I knew things were going to change. I didn't know exactly how, but I was sure it was for the better. Cole had said he'd think about it, and I had no doubt he would eventually come around. He always did. I had to admit, though, a small part of me was nervous. I had just opened a door that couldn't be closed, and there was no going back. But I wasn't scared. No, this was liberation. This was me taking control of my life, of my happiness. I met up with Evan later that afternoon. We had been talking about the idea for a while, and he was more than willing to be a part of it. Evan was never one to shy away from something exciting, and he was more than happy to pick up where we left off. As soon as we saw each other, the chemistry was undeniable. It felt like no time had passed at all since we were together. The spark was still there, the tension in the air thick with unspoken possibilities. "Is this really happening?" I asked, my voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Evan smiled, his eyes full of mischief. "It's been a long time, Isla. You tell me." I took a deep breath and smiled back. This was my moment. This was what I wanted. I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. We spent the next few hours together, and every touch, every glance, felt like a confirmation that this was right. I hadn't felt this alive in years. For the first time in a long time, I felt wanted. I felt seen. As we parted ways that night, I couldn't stop thinking about how everything was going to fall into place. I'd done what I needed to do. Now it was just a matter of waiting for Cole to realize that this was what was best for both of us. I wasn't expecting fireworks, but I was expecting him to come around. After all, he loved me, right? This was just a way for us to grow and explore. And once he saw how happy I was, he'd see that it was for the best. When I got home, Cole was still awake. He was sitting on the couch, looking at his phone. He didn't say anything as I entered, and I could feel the weight of his silence hanging in the air. It wasn't the kind of silence that said everything was okay, but the kind that made the room feel colder. His face was unreadable. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual as I walked past him, my heart pounding in my chest. "I had a good time today. Spent some time with an old friend." He looked up at me, his eyes scanning my face before he spoke. "Old friend? Is that all it was?" I froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. His tone wasn't angry, but there was something in his voice that made me feel like I was being scrutinized. I smiled, trying to keep things light. "Yeah, just catching up. You know, nothing serious," I said, trying to downplay the situation. "We had lunch and talked. That's all." He didn't seem convinced, but he nodded slowly. "I see." I went into the kitchen to grab a drink, trying to steady my nerves. I could feel his eyes on me as I moved around the room, but I refused to let it show. This was my decision. I had made it, and I wasn't going to second-guess myself now. I returned to the living room, and we sat in silence for a few moments. It wasn't the comfortable silence we usually shared, but a strained one. Finally, Cole spoke again. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice quieter than before. I looked at him, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean?" He sighed, leaning back on the couch. "You've been acting distant for a while now, Isla. I don't know what you want from me. I can't just keep pretending like everything's fine when you're out there doing whatever it is you're doing." I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly pushed it aside. This was his chance to prove he could trust me, to prove that he could handle this. "I'm just living my life, Cole. We talked about this. You agreed to give me the space to do what I need to do." "I didn't agree to this," he replied, his voice rising slightly. "You asked for it, but I didn't sign up for you to sleep with other people." I flinched at the words, but I refused to back down. It's not about sleeping with other people. It's about us being free to do what we want, without guilt. We're both entitled to our happiness. Cole was quiet for a moment, and I could tell he was trying to process what I was saying. "But does your happiness mean I have to be miserable?" he asked, his voice softening. "Does it mean I have to sit here and watch you with someone else, knowing I'm not enough for you?" His words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't considered how this might affect him, but I didn't have time to feel bad about it. This was about me. I needed this. "You are enough for me, Cole," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. "But we're both allowed to grow. You're allowed to grow. This isn't about you being inadequate. It's about me exploring things that have been missing for a while." He stood up suddenly, his hands clenched at his sides. "This isn't growth, Isla. This is selfishness. You're asking me to ignore my feelings just so you can get what you want." I watched as he walked toward the door, his back to me. I knew what he was going to say before he said it. "I need some space." My heart dropped into my stomach as I watched him leave. The door slammed behind him, and I was left standing there, unsure of what to do next. For the first time in a long time, I felt alone. I thought that everything was going to work out. I thought that once Cole saw how happy I was, everything would fall into place. But now, it was clear that I had miscalculated. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, wondering if I had made a mistake. Maybe this wasn't as simple as I thought it would be. But then I remembered how alive I felt with Evan, how everything seemed to make sense when I was with him. I couldn't go back now. I had made my choice, and I was going to see it through. Cole would understand eventually. I had to believe that. The night stretched on, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of the choices I had made. What was I really after? Was this freedom? Or was it just a way to escape the reality of a relationship that had started to feel too comfortable, too safe. The next few days felt like a blur, a mix of tense silence and the weight of my own decisions hanging over me. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation Cole and I had, and how wrong everything felt. I had expected him to adjust, to accept that I was just trying to find something more exciting, something more fulfilling. But instead, his quiet reaction, his retreat into himself, had left me unsettled. I wasn't used to being the one questioned, the one whose actions were scrutinized. I had always been the one in control, and this was the first time I felt like I was losing my grip on everything. I tried to move on, to convince myself that everything would be fine in time, but it wasn't easy. Every glance between us, every conversation, felt loaded with unspoken words. Cole wasn't the same anymore. He had withdrawn into this version of himself that I didn't recognize. Silent, distant, like he was a stranger in our own home. And it made me uneasy. I spent the next few days focusing on work, trying to distract myself from the heaviness that followed me wherever I went. But even at work, it was hard to shake the feeling that something was wrong. I found myself checking my phone more often than usual, wondering if Cole had sent a message, if he had reached out to say something, anything. But there was nothing, not a word. I couldn't stop thinking about the night I spent with Evan. It had been thrilling, exciting, everything I had hoped it would be. I felt desired, alive. I had reminded myself of who I was before the monotony of marriage had set in, before the routine made everything feel so dull. And it had felt like the most natural thing in the world to reach out to Evan, to reclaim that spark I had lost. But now, with the silence between Cole and me growing thicker, I started to wonder if I had made a mistake. Had I gone too far? No, I couldn't think that way. I had made my choice. I had done what I needed to do. And now I just needed to wait for Cole to come around, to see that I was right. This wasn't just about me. It was about our relationship, about breaking free from the constraints of what was normal and finding something new, something better. That night, I got home to an empty house. Cole had left. I hadn't expected him to be here, but the absence of him hit me harder than I cared to admit. I sat down on the couch, running my fingers over the fabric, my mind racing. I kept telling myself that I wasn't waiting for him to come back, that I wasn't waiting for his approval. But the silence in the house made it impossible to ignore the fact that things had changed. I had taken the first step, but now I was standing alone. The door creaked open a few hours later. Cole stepped inside, his face tense. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, his eyes locked on me, like he was waiting for me to speak first. But I couldn't. I had no idea what to say anymore. "You didn't come home last night," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. "I needed some space," Cole replied, his tone flat. He didn't look at me, instead walking past me to the kitchen, where he grabbed a glass of water. His movements were slow, deliberate. I watched him, trying to read his face, but there was nothing there. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't himself either. He was distant, like I had become someone he didn't know. "I didn't mean to hurt you," I said, standing up and following him into the kitchen. I needed to feel something different." "I get that," he said, still not meeting my eyes. "But you should have told me. Instead, you went behind my back and did it anyway. You didn't think about how it would affect me. You just acted." His words stung, but I wasn't going to back down. "I thought you'd understand," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I thought this would help us. It's not like I don't care about you. I just need more than what we've been doing." Cole turned to face me, his eyes sharp with something I couldn't quite place. "What if I needed more too, Isla? What if I wanted something different? I don't know how you thought I'd be okay with you sleeping with someone else. But the fact that you didn't even consider how I might feel about it, well, that says more about you than it does about me." I felt the sting of his words, but it only fueled my defensiveness. You've been distant for months, Cole. You didn't notice when things started to feel wrong. I needed to feel alive again. I needed to feel wanted, and I thought— You thought what? He interrupted, his voice rising. That I wouldn't care, that I wouldn't notice. You're right, I haven't been great lately. I haven't been the perfect husband, but I'm here. I've been here. And you couldn't even wait to figure things out before you jumped into this. I shook my head. I didn't do it to hurt you. I just didn't want to feel trapped anymore. Don't you get it? I need freedom. Cole stepped closer to me, his expression tight. Freedom, he repeated, his voice low. Is that what you think this is? You think you can just do whatever you want and I'll just accept it? Because that's not how it works, Isla. I took a step back, the reality of what I was hearing sinking in. What does that mean? It means I'm done pretending like this is normal, he said, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it now. I'm not going to sit here and let you tear us apart because you think this is some sort of experiment. I felt a chill run through me. What are you saying? He looked at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. I'm saying I can't keep doing this. You've made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I stood frozen, unsure of what to say. Cole, please. I'm not angry, Isla, he said, his tone softening, but only slightly. I'm just done. I watched as he turned away, walking out of the kitchen and up the stairs. I didn't follow him. Instead, I stood there, the weight of his words crashing over me. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't causing a scene, but the finality in his voice was something I couldn't ignore. That night, I sat in the dark, the house feeling more empty than I had ever remembered. Everything was still. Everything was quiet, and all I could think about was how far I had pushed him away. I had taken control, but at what cost? The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and confusion. Cole didn't come home for 2 nights. He texted me once to say he was staying at a friend's house, but there was no explanation, no acknowledgement of what I had done, no promise of any kind of resolution. I spent those days in a state of limbo, waiting for him to come back, for things to return to normal, for him to tell me that he understood, that he was okay with it. I told myself I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just trying to explore something that had been missing from our relationship. But as the silence dragged on, a part of me began to wonder if I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from. I tried reaching out to him, sending texts, calling, but he didn't respond. When I did hear from him, it was short and cold. I'm fine, I need space. That was it. No explanation, no hint of how he was really feeling. I wasn't sure if he was processing everything or if he was just pulling away completely. But the longer he stayed away, the more I felt like I was losing him. On the 3rd night, Cole came home late, just as I was finishing a long, restless evening of trying to distract myself with work. The house felt quieter than it had in days, the weight of the unresolved tension between us hanging thick in the air. When I heard the sound of the front door opening, my heart raced, and I immediately stood up, not sure what to expect. He entered, his movements stiff and cautious, as if unsure whether he should speak or just leave again. I watched him closely, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he just hung his jacket in the hallway and walked past me toward the kitchen without acknowledging me. Cole, I said softly, my voice trembling slightly. We need to talk. He didn't turn around immediately, but I could see his shoulders tense. After a long moment, he let out a slow breath and turned to face me. About what, Isla? About how you slept with your ex? About how I've been trying to figure out if I even know who you are anymore? His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had expected anger, maybe frustration, but hearing it all laid out like that, raw and honest, made my stomach turn. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but I couldn't find the words. I wasn't ready to hear it. I didn't want to hurt you, I managed to say, though it felt weak and pathetic even as the words left my mouth. I didn't know what else to do. I needed to feel something different. And you thought the best way to do that was to sleep with someone else? Cole asked, his voice low but filled with a quiet, simmering anger. I never wanted to hurt you, Cole, I said again, my throat tightening. But we've been drifting for so long. I thought maybe this would help. I didn't know what else to do. I wanted to feel alive again. You think you're the only one who's felt like this? Cole's voice cracked with a mix of hurt and disbelief. I've been here, haven't I? I've been trying to keep everything together. But you've been checking out for months, Isla. You've been emotionally gone long before I even realized it. This was your answer. I swallowed hard, not knowing how to respond. I had convinced myself that this would fix things, that Cole would understand, that he would see this as a way to open up our relationship. But now, hearing his voice, so filled with pain and disappointment, made me realize just how selfish I had been. I had never stopped to think about what he needed, what he was feeling. I just assumed he would be fine with it because I was. I never meant to make you feel like this, I said, my voice softer now, almost pleading. I thought you'd be okay with it. I thought we'd both benefit from it. I thought it would bring us closer. Cole looked at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Betrayal, sadness, anger. He didn't speak for a few moments, just stared at me, like he was trying to decide whether or not to say something. Then he let out a sigh, the weight of everything finally seeming to hit him. Isla, he began, his voice strained. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can go on pretending like everything is fine when you've gone and done something like this. It's not just about what you did, it's about how you didn't even think about me, how you made this decision without even considering what it would do to our marriage, to me. I felt my heart sink further into my chest, a tight knot forming in my throat. His words were like daggers, each one reminding me of how I had miscalculated everything. This wasn't how I'd imagined it. I hadn't expected him to completely withdraw from me. I thought he would accept it, maybe be hurt at first, but in the end, we'd talk it out and everything would be fine. But now, I was starting to understand that I had done something far worse than just hurt him. I had broken the trust we had built over the years. I'm sorry, I said, barely able to get the words out. I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted to lose you. Then why did you do it? He asked, his voice almost a whisper now, as though he couldn't even bring himself to yell. Why didn't you just talk to me about it first? Why did you think this was the solution? I opened my mouth to answer, but the truth was, I didn't know anymore. I had wanted to fix something inside myself that had been broken for a long time. But in trying to find something that would make me feel better, I had shattered everything around me. Cole was quiet for a moment, and I could see that he was wrestling with something inside himself. Then, slowly, he spoke again, his voice calmer but more final this time. I can't keep doing this, he said, shaking his head. I don't know if I can move past this. I need space, Isla. I think we both need space to figure out what we really want, but I don't think I can forgive you for this. His words cut through me like a knife. I couldn't breathe. I had imagined so many scenarios in my head, but none of them had involved Cole actually walking away from me. None of them had involved him deciding that he couldn't come back from this. I'll stay with a friend for a while, he continued, his voice almost too quiet to hear. I'll figure things out. But I think it's time we face the reality that this relationship might be over. I wanted to say something, anything, to stop him, to make him see that this was just a phase, that we could work through it. But the words stuck in my throat. It was too late for apologies. He had already made up his mind, and with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the quiet, empty house. The following weeks felt like a whirlwind. Though none of it was good, I had never experienced anything like this before. Everything I thought I knew about love, relationships, and my life with Cole seemed to fall apart before my eyes. The house felt more empty with each passing day, and no amount of pretending could mask the reality that I was alone. The walls, once filled with laughter and conversations, now stood silent. I would come home to an empty space, the same cold air greeting me every time I walked through the door. Cole had moved into his best friend Ryan's place a few days after our argument. At first, I didn't want to admit how much it hurt to see him leave. I told myself that he needed space, just like I did, and that this would all blow over soon. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about space. He was hurt, he was angry, and I had no idea how to fix it. Worse yet, I was starting to realize that maybe there was no fixing it. I spent the first few days after Cole's departure trying to hold it together. I went through the motions, keeping myself busy with work, pretending I was fine when my friends asked about him, acting like I hadn't just destroyed everything I'd spent years building. I spent too much time scrolling through my phone, distracting myself with work emails and social media posts, anything to avoid confronting the mess I'd made. But every night, when I'd sit down in front of the TV or lie in bed, the reality would hit me like a wave. I had pushed him away. I had asked for something that wasn't just beyond his comfort zone. It was beyond what I had ever been willing to give him. And now, I was paying the price for it. The guilt was suffocating, but I pushed it down. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I was just trying to feel alive again. But it wasn't so simple. Every day that passed without hearing from Cole, without seeing him or talking things through, felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. Finally, after almost 2 weeks of silence, I received a message from Cole. I was sitting at my kitchen table, going over some work reports, when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was a spam email, but when I saw his name flash across the screen, my heart skipped a beat. I opened it immediately, barely able to contain the rush of emotions that flooded through me. Isla, the message began. We need to talk. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I'm not sure where we go from here. I've seen a lawyer about what the next step should be. We both need to have a real conversation about our future. I'll be home tonight after work. Can we meet? The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at the screen, the message feeling surreal. My mind immediately began to race. He'd seen a lawyer. He was actually serious about this. The thought of legal action hadn't even crossed my mind. I knew he was angry, but I thought it was just frustration. I thought we'd eventually talk it out. But the lawyer, that was a reality check I wasn't ready for. I didn't respond immediately. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the familiar panic creeping up on me. Was this really happening? Was Cole actually going to go through with it? I didn't know how to process everything. I had been avoiding facing the truth for so long, but now it was all crashing down. By the time the evening came, I was still unsure of what to do. I didn't know what Cole was going to say, but I had to at least try to explain myself. I needed to make him understand that this wasn't supposed to be the end. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a chance for both of us to grow, to explore. But now it felt like it was too late. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe I wasn't the one in control of this anymore. Maybe I never was. When Cole arrived, I could immediately feel the tension in the air. He walked in slowly, his movements deliberate, his face a mask of unreadable emotion. He didn't speak at first, just stood there in the doorway, looking at me with a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. I don't know what you want me to say, Isla, he said finally, his voice low, barely above a whisper. I'm not sure what you want me to feel anymore, but I can't pretend everything's fine. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. I'm sorry, Cole, I said, my voice shaking. I never meant for things to get this far. I thought we could make it work, I really did. I thought this would bring us closer. You thought what, Isla? Cole interrupted, his voice tinged with frustration. You thought this would make things better. You really think sleeping with someone else was going to fix whatever was wrong with us? I can't even look at you the same way anymore. His words cut through me, sharper than I expected. I had spent so much time justifying my actions to myself that I hadn't prepared for the weight of his pain. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about a relationship that had been damaged beyond repair, a trust that had been shattered. I never wanted to hurt you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought you'd understand, that you'd see this as a way for us both to be free. I didn't think it would end up like this. Cole let out a bitter laugh, but there was no humor in it. Freedom, Isla, is that what you're calling it? Because what it feels like to me is that you wanted permission to do whatever you wanted without considering how it would affect me. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, I said, my voice cracking. I just wanted to feel alive again. I wanted to feel like I wasn't losing myself in all of this. I never meant to hurt you. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, Cole said softly, almost sadly. But you did, and now we're both paying the price. There was a long pause as we stood in the silence of the living room, the weight of everything hanging between us. I could feel the walls closing in, the reality of the situation sinking in deeper than I wanted to admit. Isla, I've made a decision, Cole finally said, his voice calm but firm. I can't keep doing this. I've spoken with a lawyer, and we're going to separate. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I wasn't ready for this. I thought we could fix things. I thought we could find a way to move forward together. But now, I was facing the cold, hard reality that everything I had done had led to this moment. I'm sorry, I whispered, though the words felt hollow. I never meant for this to happen. I know, Cole said, his voice softening just slightly. But it's too late now. And just like that, my world shifted. The house that had once been full of promise and love now felt like a cold, empty shell. And I was left standing there, watching the life I thought I knew slip away. The days that followed Cole's decision felt like a blur. It was like everything I had built up over the years. Our marriage, our life together, the future I thought we'd have, came crashing down all at once. I tried to maintain some sense of control, to convince myself that I could still salvage something from the wreckage. But the more I tried to piece things together, the more it became clear. Everything was slipping through my fingers. Cole had moved out and was staying with Ryan, his best friend. We had barely spoken since the night he'd told me about the lawyer and the separation. I didn't want to admit it, but the finality of it all hit me harder than I expected. I had never imagined that things would come to this, that my need for freedom and excitement would destroy everything. The truth was, I didn't know how to make things right anymore. I didn't know how to go back to a time when we were happy, when everything felt secure. I spent the first few days after the separation in a daze, trying to avoid thinking about the consequences of my actions. I went through the motions of daily life, work, meetings, social media posts, anything to keep my mind distracted from the mess I had created. But it didn't work. No matter what I did, the guilt gnawed at me. I kept replaying the conversations with Cole in my head, wondering if there had been something I could have said, some way I could have stopped the inevitable. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't just the open relationship. It wasn't just my affair with Evan. It was everything. The distance between us that had been growing for months. The emotional neglect that I had ignored for far too long. The affair had just been the breaking point. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, I sat in the empty house, the silence pressing in on me. It was the first time I had truly allowed myself to feel the weight of everything. I had spent the past few weeks avoiding reality, but now, sitting alone in the dark, it hit me. The house that once felt like a home, filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and hollow. Cole was gone, and I was left with the mess I had created. I had been trying to keep busy, filling the void with work and social media and anything else that would distract me from facing the truth. But now, there was nowhere to hide. I didn't know how to fix things with Cole. I didn't know how to undo the damage I had caused. I had been so focused on my own desires, on my own need for validation, that I hadn't stopped to consider how my actions were affecting him. And now, I had lost him. I had lost everything. It wasn't long before I received the next message from Cole. This time, it wasn't a simple text or an email. It was a formal letter from his lawyer. outlining the next steps in the separation process. The words on the paper were cold and final, a stark reminder that this wasn't just a temporary setback, it was the end of something. I stared at the letter for a long time, unable to bring myself to read it in full. The reality of it all finally sank in. There was no going back. I had lost Cole, and there was nothing I could do to change it now. I had pushed him away, and now I was left to deal with the consequences. I didn't know how to handle the guilt, the shame that I felt for what I had done. I didn't know how to face anyone, least of all Cole. I knew I had hurt him in ways I couldn't even begin to understand, and I wasn't sure if he would ever forgive me. But despite all the pain, a part of me still felt angry. Angry at him for not understanding, for not being willing to compromise. Angry at myself for ever thinking that this was a solution, for ever thinking that the open relationship would make things better. But mostly, I was angry at the way everything had unraveled so quickly. I hadn't prepared for this. I hadn't prepared for the fallout. I thought I could handle it, that everything would work out in the end. But now, I was staring at the ruins of my marriage, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. The weeks that followed were filled with back-and-forth conversations with lawyers, discussions about the division of assets, and endless questions about what came next. Cole and I barely spoke. The few times we did communicate were through lawyers or via text messages that felt cold and transactional. There was no warmth between us anymore, no understanding. And with each passing day, it became clearer to me that this was not just the end of our marriage, it was the end of a part of myself I hadn't even realized I had lost. In the midst of all this, I found myself reflecting on my relationship with Evan. For a brief moment, I had thought that being with him had solved something for me, that it had given me the attention and excitement I craved. But now, as I thought back on it, I realized how shallow it all was. Evan was a distraction, nothing more. He was never the solution to the emptiness I felt inside. The truth was, I had been searching for something outside of myself, trying to fill a void that only I could address. And instead of facing that, I had taken the easy route. I had tried to escape my own unhappiness by running from it, and it had only made things worse. I wasn't ready to face it, but I knew I had to. I had to come to terms with the fact that I had lost Cole because of my own selfishness. I had to accept that the life I had known was over. The relationship I had once cherished, the one I had taken for granted, was gone. And now, I was left to rebuild. One day, while I was going through some old photos, trying to distract myself from the pain, I found a picture of Cole and me from one of our vacations. We were smiling, laughing together in a moment of genuine happiness. It seemed so far away now, so distant. I couldn't even remember the last time we had shared a moment like that, the last time I had looked at him and felt truly connected. The realization hit me hard. The love we had, the connection we had once shared, had been there all along, but I had been too blind to see it, too caught up in my own desires and needs to appreciate it. I sat there, staring at the photo, tears streaming down my face. I had lost him, and there was no getting him back. The man I had once loved, the man who had stood by me through everything, was gone. And it was all my fault. I knew I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the hurt I had caused. But I had to start somewhere. I had to figure out who I was without him, without the life we had built together. It was going to be hard, maybe the hardest thing I had ever done. But it was the only choice I had left. As I stared at the picture one last time, I made a promise to myself. I would take the time to heal. I would take the time to face the parts of myself I had been running from. And maybe, one day, I could learn to be the person I wanted to be. But for now, all I could do was pick up the pieces and start over. But this time, I would do it on my own.